You know who my next guest is? She's everywhere. UFC on ESPN, Contender Series, Invicta FC. Happy to welcome Laura Sanko here on the program. Laura, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you as always for having me. I always enjoy your stuff, and so it's fun to come on and not just watch. I watch your interviews all the time, so it's fun to be on here.
Well, I appreciate that. The check's in the mail. Thank you for that. Off the top, got to mention that. But I wanted to start first with just, your schedule this year because, like I mentioned, you're everywhere and we've got this pandemic going on and there's travel. And you also have a family as well. How challenging has it been this year just having to deal with all that?
It's been real challenging. I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's definitely been my busiest year by far. Some of that was just due to the longer trips that we had, like the stint we did in Florida and then Fight Island and then kind of Contender being sandwiched in there as well. There's been a lot going on. There was one week where I think I did 4 shows in 6 days, and I don't ever want to do that again.
No, it's tough. It's tough. I know that the grind, the schedule can be a lot. So, kudos to you for getting through it. One thing I wanted to ask, and I think we talked about this last time, but has the UFC ever asked you to move to Vegas just because of them having so many shows there? Because I know you do travel, obviously, from Missouri to go over there.
Yeah, they haven't, but I think they probably know that wouldn't really be an option for me because, I live on a farm, not exactly the easiest thing to give up and or transport to Las Vegas. It's really not hard. It's a 2.5 hour flight direct. It's super easy I could get out there and back in one day, or at least I used to be able to with pre-COVID, flight schedules. I'm not sure that that's the case anymore, but regardless, easy enough for me to get out there or wherever I need to be. So that hasn't really been too much of a point of contention. There's definitely times where I'm aware that if I lived out there, I might get a few more opportunities, a few more consistent opportunities. But as we just said, I'm pretty busy as it is, so I don't really know that I could take much more on my plate anyway. So I'm happy. I love Kansas.
I'm glad to hear you say that because, I often get asked, why don't you move to Vegas? But I live in Vancouver now. I grew up here. I love it. My family's here. There's no way I'd move. I love it too much here, and a lot of the work I do, anyways, luckily, is remote. So so I hear you on that for sure. Also, I'm sure there's been a lot of quarantining over the last bit with all the travel you're doing. What's your go-to? I mean, I'm sure you're studying up on, the fighters and all that, but do you have anything that's like a go-to that you use when you're quarantined?
Yeah, well, a lot of Netflix. Yes, a lot of my quarantine time is definitely used as study time because when I'm home, I try to be really home and not. It would be easy for me to get sucked into. I mean, you can never consume too much MMA information. So I try to be a little bit siloed when I'm at home and just really focus on being at home. So when I use those quarantine times as a way to just deep dive and get ready for whatever I have coming up around me. But I have my Netflix and chill moments. I was really, really, really late to the game on Sons of Anarchy. So I think that's 8 seasons. So that took me a minute to chomp through all that. And then The Crown, which is totally different than Sons of Anarchy.
Right, yes. Yeah. A little bit of a contrast, yeah.
The Crown just came back on, and I find that show fascinating. It's not exactly the most exciting, but to me, it's fascinating. Yeah,
I've seen Sons of Anarchy. The Crown, my wife watches, and I sort of catch it as I'm glancing by. So I hear it's good. I don't think she'd be watching it if she didn't like it. So
yeah, it's really, really interesting.
Let's talk about Contender Series. I love the show, love the format, and you've done obviously an amazing job. And it's just great to see. Obviously, I know you started with Invicta and then Contender Series, now the UFC. It's been cool to watch your growth in that as well. But really big season. I think it was 37 contracts, I think total were handed out. I wanted to know what was sort of your moment that stood out to you this season. I'll give you mine, just to kind of give you one that stands out, but a little bit biased here. But TJ Laramie winning his contract. I've been interviewing TJ since he was 18 years old. To see him not only get that win and get the contract, but for him to do it on the anniversary of his mother's passing, I thought was just very, it stood out to me. What was one for you that really was?
You just gave me chills for sure. I love those moments more than I can really articulate well. Adrian Yanez is another one that sticks out for me for that very reason. That was were they on the same episode?
I'm trying to remember. No, I think they were different weeks. But
I think they were back to back. And man, it was that was a really emotionally charged few episodes there. So many fascinating, deep, tough stories, coming into the Contender Series. So he sticks out for me. The Costi brothers stick out to me. There's I don't know. I love that show so much. I get kind of giddy and inarticulate when I start talking about it because the fan in me the fan in me really comes out. And I love the fan in me combined with how much I love people in general and people's stories and their lives and what has brought them to where they are. You know, those two things are the crossroads, and Contender is where those crossroads meet. And so I'm honored to be a part of it. And I feel, man, I think you're hard pressed to find better MMA television than that, I think, because it's such a palatable amount of time. It's not a 7-hour, and I love the UFC obviously, but it's not a 7-hour show. There's a lot of finishes. You've got the drama of Dana sitting right there and him announcing the contracts. I love everything about it.
Yeah, and you're in a cool position because you literally get to witness someone achieving their dream by, you know, Dana White, you know, standing right next to him. He says, hey, we're giving the contract. So that must be so rewarding, you know, to be able to do that and just be a part of that you've been, you know, literally every week seeing someone achieve their dream.
Hugely. And I'm kind of at this point, like a little bit tooting my own horn, having been part of every single episode. You know, there's definitely some staples of the show, Bisping and Felder and Brendan and Dan Hellie, but, you know, every single episode right here. And I love it for that reason, to be there in these life-changing moments. You know, there are some big fights that I've been able to be around in the UFC, big names, certainly some big moments there as well. But to me, it's the unknown guy or gal achieving their dream, and being there in that moment is just like, I can't even put into words. The joy just like emanates off of these people, and I cannot wait until COVID's over and I can like stand next to them again, not because I want to be on camera or whatever, but like there's something about, I don't know, being right next to someone when they're going through that moment is just, it's amazing. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for that next season to come back whenever it does. I know they're still kind of figuring out the dates, but let's talk about UFC 255. At the time we're recording this, we had that on the weekend. Valentina Shevchenko defending her title. I know she got a little bit of criticism just with that. I think it was the second round where Maya sort of controlled her a little bit, but outside of that, I thought she put on a pretty dominant performance. What was your biggest takeaway from that fight, especially her coming off that leg injury?
Well, I think, you know, she's entered that John Jones territory, right, where unless they have these godlike performances, we're not happy, which is just, it's ridiculous. It's not fair to all of the work and all of the greatness that she has achieved. It's also not fair to Jennifer Maia, who, someone who's watched her for a very long time, I was well aware that she was going to give Valentina a tough fight, a really tough fight, which is why I think, you know, Kevin Iole and I talked about this, and the odds on this fight were, in my opinion, just stupid, just disrespectful. And I understand that it's odds have other things playing into them, but the fact is that people thought that, you know, 16 times out of 17, I think is what it ended up being, that Valentina would win that fight. And that's just, it's MMA, and it's women's MMA on top of it. So I don't think that the numbers were giving Jennifer Maia the respect that she deserved. But the fact is that Valentina Shevchenko is incredible, and she is a step above the rest of this division, or at least the people that we have seen thus far. You never know who's waiting in the wings and who's going to be surging up next. So she's incredible. She's well-rounded, and I think that, frankly, around like what we saw in round number 2, where we saw her be a little bit human. It's not like she got dominated or beat up, but she was controlled. I think rounds like that are good for her entertainment value, because as much as we'll sit here and, you know, criticize, it also leaves that drama of like, oh, she is human and maybe so-and-so could beat her. And I love that idea going into a fight. You don't want it to feel prescribed.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. By the way, your podcast with Kevin Iole, The Odd Couple, you have a very long title, so I forgot to include that off the top, but we will talk about that before we wrap up the interview here, because I'm excited about that new show that you're doing. It looks like Jessica Andrade is going to be next for Valentina. What's interesting about that matchup, obviously, so Andrade has power. You know, I tell people this all the time. You just don't see, you know, a fighter like Andrade, or, you know, in those weight classes, I should say, you know, knocking girls out. Like, I'll never forget her knockout over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Like, you just don't see like a quick first round knockout, other than maybe like a Nunes. It doesn't happen too often. So that's where this matchup to me gets very interesting. How do you look at that fight from a style perspective with Andrade and Shevchenko, which looks like it's going to be next?
You know, stylistically, I do think it's fun. I think it's interesting, but with many of the Valentina Shevchenko fights, if you were ask me who I'm picking at this point, it's going to be Valentina. I think that largely comes down to, in this fight, just the sophistication in her striking, her ability to get into the pocket, land strikes, and then also retreat from the pocket. Jessica has a ton of power. She's a bulldozer. She's got the wrestling that we don't often see, powerful wrestling that we don't often see from women in that division. But Valentina's ability to cut angles and be a little bit more of a sniper, I think, is going to give Jessica some problems. I think Valentina has a style not unlike Rose on the feet in terms of what she's, her ability to move laterally, her ability to not be there and not absorb shots. Now, I understand that Jessica beat Rose, but up until the point when Rose made a pretty critical error, Rose was looking really good on the feet, and I don't think that Valentina is going to make an error like that. So I do see Valentina taking this fight. But like we just said, that round 2 with Jennifer Maia, I would say that Jessica is probably every bit as strong as Jennifer Maia is, and it could be interesting if she is able to get in and really employ some wrestling, because once she was in top side control, Jennifer Maia did a great job of controlling that fight. So I think that has to be the key for Jessica, is to focus on getting in safely, clinching up, and then landing in that dominant position and slowing the fight down, taking that dominant position and running with it for as long as she can.
I know we're waiting to see when Amanda Nunes is going to fight your teammate Megan Anderson. That fight was supposed to happen at 256. They've moved the fight. Understandable, obviously, with everything going on outside the cage. Do you think we will see Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes, the trilogy fight? They don't typically do it where the fighter loses twice, but that second fight was really close. I know a lot of people who feel like Valentina won that fight. Do you think it's a possibility?
I think potentially Valentina won that fight as well. I don't know that it's a near-term possibility, but it is an intriguing possibility. And I think, when you talk about, it's funny because like earlier when you were saying the power of Andrade, in the back of my brain was going, oh yeah, that could be really interesting. And I was like, but wait a second, she also fought Amanda Nunes.
That's right, yeah.
That's incredible power. So never mind. I think she can handle the power. I don't have a strong answer to that. I wish I had a stronger answer for you on that, whether I think it's going to happen or not. I would watch it, but it's probably not my top pick in terms of what I would want to watch next. How about, listen, look at me and look being an interviewer on your show. What about, I want to hear your opinion though. Like, I think
it's the biggest fight you can do right now. If we're looking at the UFC, that is the one time I think where they're going to miss Chris Cyborg, because that rematch with her and Nunes would have done huge numbers just with the way Chris, lost that fight. And I know I do host a show with Chris Cyborg, so I'm being a little bit biased, but honestly, I don't think that's outrageous to suggest that that's the biggest fight. So to me, Nunes and Shevchenko, just because they're competing at such a high level right now, I know people want to see Zhang Weili and Shevchenko next, but to me, I want to see that third fight between Nunes and Shevchenko, and I don't think I'm alone there because of just the star power and how dominant they are. So there you go.
I don't hate it. I'd buy it.
Yeah, no, for sure. How's Megan Anderson doing? Unfortunate news. It's understandable from Nunes' perspective why she wanted to postpone the fight, but Megan, I know, had been training for a while, and this was a big opportunity for her. And I think from a style perspective, it is an interesting fight because Megan's got really great stand-up. I'm sure you've spoken to her. How is she handling all this with the fight? We don't even have a date yet when it's going to be rescheduled.
Listen, she's understandably disappointed, but I think like any real professional, she's just going to continue doing what she does and has always done, which is to train consistently in all facets of the sport. She's never had like an easy run of it. It's like something weird is always happening in her fights, before her fights. So I think in some ways that's kind of prepared her to handle these frustrating situations. But I think more time to prepare for Amanda Nunes is never necessarily a bad thing. So I think she'll be just fine.
The other fight that we're sort of hearing should happen, but there's nothing signed yet, is Zhang Weili and Rose Namajunas. What I find interesting about this as well is they have the same manager, so I imagine the negotiation wouldn't be too difficult. Are you hearing anything? Because this seems like a slam dunk fight to make with Namajunas winning her last fight and Zhang Weili defeating Jan Jacek. But what's your take on that fight and when it might happen?
I wish I knew. I wish I had some insider information for you. But unfortunately, I'm generally, even though I'm a reporter, James, I'm typically the last person.
Right, to find out. Oh, no, fair enough. Yeah, no, I like the honesty. Yeah.
But no, I like that fight a lot. I think that it's such a clash of styles because Zhang Weili is so powerful and she's so good at marching forward and just landing hellaciously powerful shots. And then you've got Rose, who sort of darts in and out and is able to be a sniper, but also has some pretty good power. I love that matchup. I think, man, the mental fortitude of Zhang Weili, though, whew, that woman to me is unbreakable in so many ways.
Do you think Khabib Nurmagomedov stays retired, or do you think that he will come back and fight again?
Golly, I think between him and Conor, I swear, the toying with our emotions. I think he takes a very different perspective than Conor does. I think Conor enjoys putting out, completely false information just to like play with us and play with the media. I think he has fun doing that. I think Khabib is just a very principled individual who other people, whether it's Dana or the media, whoever, will take pieces of what they say and put that to the forefront. So I'm not trying to say that Khabib enjoys toying with us the way that Conor does, but I do think we'll see him again. I do, and I'm basing that on nothing other than just a gut reaction and maybe my own selfish desire to see him go for 30-0, like was his father's wish, against Conor in a filled arena. That is what I would like to see.
No, very interesting. And I do find it interesting that McGregor and Poirier, at least right now, is not for a title. I'm wondering if that's why they're maybe working on something behind the scenes. What do you think of that rematch with, I'm a little surprised actually that McGregor took the fight, only because, I figured that he would only want to fight someone if there was a title on the line. He just fought Cowboy Cerrone. What do you make of this Poirier and McGregor rematch, with, by the way, is at 155? A lot of people saying, oh, Conor destroyed him, he's going to do it again. Well, it's different weight class, different fighters now.
Totally different weight class, and we can all agree that Dustin Poirier is a completely different fighter than he was when they fought at featherweight. I mean, completely different. And frankly, so is Conor. Man, I really give credit to Conor in this matchup, because to me, there's always been this narrative that Conor picks and chooses who he fights, right? Which is true, right? He's got the power. He's earned the power to do that, in my opinion. But there's always going to be this little asterisk, because it's like, oh, he's fighting Nate Diaz instead of champions. He's fighting, we want to see the Jorge. I want to see the Jorge fight. But again, it's not a fight that propels you on a title path. It's an interesting fight. It's a fun fight. It's a money-making fight, but it's not a title path fight. Dustin Poirier is an interesting fight. I'm sure it's going to be a money-making fight, and it is for sure a title path fight. It's a legit number one contender type of fight. So for that reason, I respect it and I love it, and I can't wait to see it.
It's going to be great. And then the other big fight we have is, it's not official yet, but it looks like it's going to happen. Israel Adesanya moving up to 205 to fight Jan Blachowicz. What do you make of that whole situation? Because it's interesting that Adesanya, just after a couple title defenses, might become a double champ here. It's pretty incredible.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that Izzy possesses a really rare combination of skills, and the fan in me wants to see him tested in a different way. We've seen him out technique people, and I'll tell you, along his path to the top, I was always, when push came to shove, it's like I would say all these amazing things about Izzy and I would mean them, but then when someone's like, okay, but who are you picking? I'd be like, but he's fighting a wrestler, so I'm gonna pick the wrestler. Or, oh, he's fighting this really powerful guy, I might have to side with him. Even though I was like saying all these great things, for whatever reason, I was tending to pick against him. And he, of course, proved me wrong every single time, and I love it. And so to see a new type of challenge in a new weight class is super exciting. And for once, I actually am going to pick Izzy in that fight.
When is your next assignment, for those who might not know? When are we going to see you on the desk again, or doing the reporting stuff?
Yeah. So for UFC 256, I'll be doing Quick Hits, which is the UFC's sort of social media show, for lack of a better term. So I'll have interviews popping up on their Facebook page all night long, which sounds, I don't know, it sounds like kind of rinky-dink, but I'll tell you what, it's really pretty cool to interview fighters in that setting, because I don't have a time. Like when I'm on ESPN, I have to hit usually like a 2.5 minute mark pretty specifically. So sometimes I'll have a great interview, but if a fighter starts talking too long, they won't air it because it just doesn't fit into the program format. But on the Facebook side of things, like we have a 10-minute interview if we want to. So you get some really interesting reactions and information, and just sort of a more casual setting, so you can see kind of a side of the fighters that you might not normally see. So that's super fun. And then the weekend after that, the Khamzat Chimaev, Leon Edwards card, I'm doing the ESPN role. So I'll be backstage for that.
Very cool. Are we any step closer to seeing you do some commentary for the UFC? Because I know that's got to be, the sort of the last thing on the bucket list.
I think they're really sick of me asking about it.
It's got to happen. Like, I would think it's been crazy that we've had this sport for as long as we have, and there hasn't been a woman in there doing any commentary, right?
Yeah, and I always have to give a nod to Kathy Long because she did do UFC 1, but she
That's right. Oh yeah.
She didn't say much, and then she didn't really do it after. So we kind of tend to forget about her, but we do love Kathy. That's I guess not a question that I can necessarily answer. They know it's what I eventually want to do. They're very, very aware of it. And I guess my job at this point is just to continue to get the reps in and to build the credibility wherever I can. I think, understandably, they love having well-tenured UFC fighters in that role, and I get it. That makes a lot of sense. But I do think, I'm not asking or not even necessarily proposing that someone in my position would carry a pay-per-view card. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that someone like myself, or specifically myself, could be an interesting addition to, Brendan Fitzgerald, Paul Felder, and Laura Sanko. What else? What other perspective can I bring to the table? So, like I said, I don't know that it's necessarily on the horizon. Hope it is, and I'm just going to continue to work hard to try to convince them that it's a potentially a good idea, and that the fans, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like, we do these shows to make money, and we do these shows to entertain fans and to connect fans to the sport. And I do think that I can do a good job of that, regardless of whether I fought in the UFC or not. So doing things like Invicta color commentary on 4 hours notice.
That's right. I didn't even ask you about that. How was that?
Yeah, so stuff like that, like, trust me, it crossed my mind because I'm well aware that if I go out there and sound like an idiot, the UFC watches those shows, and that's gonna, that's gonna derail my potential progress that I may have made in the right direction. So it was a gamble I took, and I'm happy I did. I had a great time doing it. I think it turned out really well, and it's cool to see Kayla Harrison do her thing. And so every opportunity that I can take to do things like that, just chip away at that. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to do the thing with Kevin, because I'm essentially borrowing from his credibility, because he felt like he approached me and said, listen, I really enjoy what you have to say. I think that you have some really interesting thoughts, and I want to create a platform where you and I can both, but especially you, can showcase your analysis. So that was part of the reason for it, because as I know doing these things on a regular basis is a lot of work, way more work than it sounds like at the beginning. Like, oh, I'm just going to do a podcast every week. There's a lot that goes into it. And I was hesitant to commit to yet another thing on my plate. But when it was Kevin, I was like, I've got to do this, right? It felt like someone that could put me a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and that show is called The Odd Couple, by the way. Great idea, great show. I think it's cool, though, because, again, you guys are, giving a different perspectives. Kevin's been involved in combat sports for a very long time. You can bring that perspective, and then we get sort of your perspective as well from not only, your reporting work and commentating work, but also, you train as well. So I think you give sort of that technical analysis as well on top of that, too. So
for sure. I mean, we're an odd couple. I mean, I never would have expected to be doing a podcast with Kevin Iole, so I don't think anybody else would either. But it's kind of perfect like that. You say, I mean, he brings this historical perspective that I always feel like I learned something from him when I talk to him, because he'll start telling these stories from like the 80s, when he was ringside and such and such fight, like, and I love it when he does that. And then, as you say, I can bring the sort of day-to-day, this is what it's like to cut weight, this is what it feels like to be in the gym, or the technical side of things. So I think we're definitely an odd couple, but a good couple.
Laura, we went way over time. Thank you so much. It was great catching up with you. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to plug? I know you do promote some stuff on social media as well. Also remind people where they can find you on social media. I'll give you the last word.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can find me at Laura_Sanko on Twitter. I'm really active on Instagram, not so much on Facebook, but Instagram, you can generally get a hold of me. I try to respond to about everybody, and definitely want to give a shout out to my biggest sponsor, Direct Hemp. It is a CBD website. It's not a brand, so they carry like a lot of different top tier brands. So you're not stuck just using one brand, but my discount applies to the entire website. You can use code FANCY. Eat to Evolve, keeping me on my diet regardless of where I am, and drink HRW, some of the best pre-workout and recovery hydrogen tablets that you can find.